Hello, everyone. We're going to get started here. This is second edition of CPU EDU. It's a webinar that we are going to accomplish monthly. We had our first one last month, which was about cybersecurity tips and trends. This month is about data backup. CPU EDU will continue to be had every month. It will be the last Thursday of every month from 12:30 to 1 p.m. here on Zoom. The same link will always work, which you will have, or the QR code can be scanned in the emails that we send out or on the presentation here. We appreciate all the partnerships and relationships that we have. This webinar was extended to our support agreement clients and other clients who have recurring services with us. We wanted to just add value and give education where we can to our services and our service agreement clients to provide that extra value. As I said, the topic today is data backup. It's very important. We suggest having 2 or 3 layers of protection and copies of your data. You really can never have enough just because of how vital it is. The topics today are backups in general and how they are no longer an option, that they are now a necessity. Internal backups, which would be backups that happen at your facility and local to you. External backups, which are backups that happen off-site to protect you from physical threats. Personal backups, that would be something that you could do at your local computer level or even at your home if you so choose to implement it there. And then the recovery and continuity of those backups. Those will be the topics that we touch on today. And we'll start with the first slide, which is backups, necessity versus option. The importance of data in today's technological world, data is very vital. Having multiple backups is no longer optional, it is necessary. It's necessary because there are many different types of threats that could happen to your systems, to your technology, and cause data loss. Some of these threats, one would be cybercrime. The most common thing that comes to mind in that is ransomware, which I'm sure we've all heard of. It can get on your computer in many different ways, or your server. And if it gets on one device on your network, it can spread. And what it can do is it can encrypt your files, which will make your files unusable by you as a user and put them in a format that is unrecognizable. Ransomware term ransom, obviously it comes because the party that provides this problem to you will have some type of monetary payment option that they will demand and say that if you pay a certain amount of money to some undisclosed account that is usually difficult to trace, then they will unencrypt or decrypt your files and allow you to have access to them once again. For example, I believe it was 2019, even the city of Greenville had that occur to them. It got on a computer, spread across their map network drives, and encrypted their data, and it made their data unusable. And to be honest, full prevention isn't really possible, but knowing that you can recover is the key. And those data backups that you have will allow you to ignore the ransom that's being demanded. And with a little bit of downtime, depending on what type of backups you do have, you can recover from those. So while you cannot prevent it, you can be safe knowing that at least if it does occur, that you can recover. The second item is self-inflicted. So this is human error, and it can result in file corruption or data loss as well. To be honest, we're all human, and humans make mistakes. Some of those common mistakes that employees or administration in your organization could do would be to overwrite a file that's important with a file that contains data that isn't relevant. That file or a important file or folder could also be deleted either by accident or intentionally, which we hope the latter doesn't occur, but accidents definitely do happen with misstrokes of keys and mouse clicks. Another self-inflicted threat is closing programs or files wrong, and that results in corruption. So if you have an Excel file or a database file or any type of file that is open, and if it's terminated improperly by shutting the computer down or closing out of it incorrectly, it could definitely result in that database or that specific file being corrupt and then no longer usable moving forward. Education of staff on proper procedures is very important, such as closing out those files, such as being careful when you're moving files, renaming files, or deleting files that are not important, so that you're just extra vigilant and careful and make sure that the steps that you take are proper and avoid these human mistakes where all possible. Another way to avoid self-inflicted data loss is setting proper permissions on shared file locations. And what that looks like is all of your workstations typically communicate with the server. Those servers share files and folders with your individual employees, and you can have proper permissions set on those files and folders that will allow or disallow specific people to have access. You could have read permissions, or you could have write or full control. So if you only have read permissions, all you can do is really open the files and view them and the contents that they have. You can't rename them, you can't move them, or you can't delete them. So it is important to have some type of permission structure set up where specific groups or individuals have access by your dictation to specific files and folders. Another common threat that could affect your data would be acts of God. So things like electrical surges due to storms, power outage, flooding, fire, etc. Storms and power surges can cause electrical problems that result in corrupt data or damaged drives that do contain that data. Electricity could travel through power cords, through Ethernet cables and other methods, and it could damage physical components that are connected inside of your server or your computers. These other acts of God that I mentioned are really catastrophic environment issues. Nobody wants this to occur, but it does occur. Fire to your facility and it burns up servers or devices that contain data, or maybe flooding that happens, and that water damages the electronics and causes the data to be unreadable. So, there are a lot of different things that can happen, and it is important to make sure that you have a backup in case those things happen. The reason that backing up and data protection is very important. So one example I like to use, which isn't very specific, but let's just say you had something happen like we discussed, fire or flooding, and all of your equipment in your entire building, technology-wise, was damaged, and you had to replace computers and printers and servers and network equipment. Yes, that would cost a bit of money, $10,000 to $100,000 to replace everything. But in comparison to data loss, that's a drop in the bucket. Your data loss could result in lost downtime. It can result in business fatality of having to close. It could result in legal fees or lawsuits that you face, and those damages we all know could be in $1 million or more in lost revenue. So that's why I say data backup is no longer an option. It is definitely necessary for a business to have, and if you have important data, you should definitely have multiple backups. Some of those backup options that you can have. Internal backups is one that we'll discuss first. And internal backups are backups that happen when you within your facility that offer faster recovery when needed, but it isn't protected from some of those physical threats that we discussed. Some of the options that you have for internal backups is you could have non-managed third-party applications. We don't really recommend those because, you could set a backup and think you're good, and next thing you know, weeks have gone by and you need to recover something and they haven't really been working properly. Some of these apps you may have seen are, Cobian, Carbonite, Handy Backup, things like that. Those are all just third-party programs that individuals can purchase, but they are not managed, and there is no responsibility for success and recovery on these vendors that sell these applications. The second type that I'll mention is Windows Server Backup. So just about every business has a server, whether it be on-premise or cloud, but in this instance, we're talking about servers in your facility. Windows Server Backups is a feature or role that servers has where they're built into servers. They can be set on a schedule to back up files, folders, system volumes, full images, things like that. It works decently well, and it's been used for a long time, but it is difficult to monitor and get live reports. Maintenance on your server to check these backups occurs. It is a good option, but it is not the best option in our opinion. The next option would be Veeam backups. So Veeam is an application that CPU pays for and installs on all clients who have backup packages. It can be installed on workstations or servers. And what it does is it has live reporting, and it is monitored daily by CPU to ensure that these nightly backups are successful. Every morning we have a monitor that we look at, and it literally shows, as simple as it sounds, green or red. If there's red, that means a backup missed, and we need to take action and figure out why and make sure that we get one ran so that we can have a concurrent backup. If it's green, we obviously know that it was successful last night or the previous schedule set, and that it's good to go. The key there is that it's monitored by us. We take a look at it daily. We can even get reports on if we set those up on backups that fail that are very critical, so that when it happens, we know that it happens and we can take action. Veeam also allows for flexible destination media. That can be external hard drives. It can be network attached storage devices. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Locally connected drives are typically mechanical drives that are USB connected or some type of connection to the physical server. There is some failure rate that comes with those locally connected drives, and we monitor those, and they may need to be replaced if they do fail, but it's something that we can stay on top of and make sure we change out when necessary. Because it is directly connected to the server, there is some vulnerability to attacks. If the server were to get compromised, physical devices that are connected to it could be affected, but there are measures that we put in place to make that as difficult or as minimal as possible. Another type of destination media that I briefly mentioned is network attached storage device, or NAS device for short. This is kind of the preferred method. It's essentially a smaller storage device that can sit to the side, and it can connect to the network and communicate with the server that way. One of the biggest things about NAS devices is it can have multiple drives in it for redundancy. So the data can be mirrored across drives. It could have a setup where if a drive fails, it can continue to operate until that drive can be replaced. It has additional password protection layers that a locally connected drive does not have. With it being connected to the network, it can be segregated from other points of your network to minimize the threat of it being attacked, being on your main network. It's just a better option. It's more resilient to with ransomware protection using this NAS device, because it's not accessible by any other devices on your network except for the Veeam backup server. One other destination media is virtualization. And I know that's kind of bland, but it's essentially just an image of entire data sets and operating systems. And it can be stored, and it's not a set of files and folders and things like that. It's an image that contains those, and it allows for faster exploration and recovery of the backup sets that we have in place. They can be stored in single files or multiple VHD files instead of just having some physical hardware. Backup is only half of the program. You also have to be able to recover. So recovery expectations with internal backups. With proper local backups, recovery times can be one of the faster options, as it's all local and will not require much, if any, network uploading or network utilization. It's just really reliant on IT restoration of the operating system and the data, and that's based off of read-write basis on the drives that they're on. So it's typically a little faster because it's there, it's local. You can get in there and start the restoration process, and it doesn't depend on network or drive and minimal read-write drive basis. There is what internal backups do not offer, which we mentioned a couple of times, is the prevention from local issues that we mentioned earlier, theft, acts of God, things like that, which is why this is only one layer of backups that you should have. The next one that we suggest is external backups. So external backups allow for protection from those physical threats we mentioned, and they are a good addition to your backup protocol. Two different backup applications. Veeam, which we mentioned earlier, backs up in multiple ways, but most commonly when we do external is virtual images of the entire system for those fast exploration and recovery times that we mentioned. This is more commonly known as disaster recovery and things like that. The other application that we predominantly use for backups offsite is called Assay. Assay is the application that we pay for and use for more simple file backups, folders, things that are vital, that are just files and folders that we can restore quickly when we need to do so. All offsite data backups are stored in our version of the quote unquote cloud. Cloud is a term that's thrown around, and some people know exactly what it means, some do not, but the cloud is just a space somewhere other than where you are that is accessible via the internet. And the cool thing that I tell people is that we actually have a cloud that we can let you walk in. So we have a fireproof vault facility next door with a company that we deal with, Banks Datacom. It is a secure facility. It is fireproof. It has a diesel generator out back. So if regional or area things occur that allow for power issues to occur and things like that, this facility can continue to operate, this cloud can continue to operate, and we can make sure that it is accessible for our clients. The recovery expectations for offsite options often rely on network speeds to restore and drive time physically in a vehicle to your facility to deliver the data if network speeds are not the best option. So it is a fast recovery time and does allow to get back up, but maybe not as quite as internal, which is why both of the methods are suggested, because you can protect yourself in multiple different ways, have multiple options for recovery, and we can help you choose which method is best and accomplish it for you should there be a need to recover any backups minimally or severely. So external backups are just another piece to the puzzle that you should have in order to be completely safe and compliant with having multiple copies of your data. The next slide is for personal backups. So personal backups are simple but less managed methods of backing up files that are really not 100% crucial to business functionality. These are things that can be on your workstation at the office or even your personal computer at home that you want to make sure that are being backed up for personal safety. These aren't things that are going to be detrimental to your business or anything like that. The one thing to mention is that any of these personal backup options, CPU does not monitor or maintain any of these options unless specifically asked to with some of the applications we mentioned. Then we would go with one of those methods in the previous sections and make sure that, Assay was installed or Veeam is installed and the backups are working and monitored. But files on your local workstations that you do want to back up, nothing wrong with having data that you feel is important, but they should not be critical to your business. They should be things that are just specific to you as an individual or for your business that you would that would be detrimental to you as a staff member and maybe decrease your productivity or things like that, not that would cause a business interruption. So what methods can you use as an end user? So if you have a Windows computer, there is built-in software in Windows 10 and newer operating systems, Windows 10 or 11. There is an application called Backup and Restore, and you could search for that on your local computer, set it up, choose which files you want to back it up to, that you want to back up, and choose how you want to back them up. Another application is called File History. So this is more just going to a file from a couple of days prior and restoring a copy of it, without some type of elaborate recovery of a whole folder or a lot of different items. If you have Apple products, there are some basic applications that do the same thing, such as Time Machine. And there's also other third-party apps that we mentioned previously, like Carbonite or Cobian, that are supported by Apple products. In general, as far as how often or things like that, CPU recommends having at least 3 copies of important data. And we also recommend backups occur nightly, or at a minimum, they should occur weekly. And these are all settings that we can set or that your IT could set. These are things that you could set in the different methods or programs that are used to make sure those backups are taking place. As far as backup media types for personal backups, for personal use, the easier choice is usually a flash drive, a USB drive, or a thumb drive. They're quick, they're simple, and most drives nowadays are very affordable for space but space can be an issue with those. You could keep them with you. You could store them somewhere secure. You could have multiple ones if you want, but that's typically the simplest and best option. There are other alternative methods, such as a USB hard drive. So there are 2.5-inch drives in a caddy with a small USB cable. You can plug them. They can be portable. They can fit in your pocket. They can fit in your bag, and you can take them around. The only thing with hard drives that are actually physical drives, they have some mechanical error, but nowadays solid state drives exist in those same methods. They're chip drives. They tend to be a little safer when it comes to physical abuse and things like that. But flash drives, USB drives are usually the best option. You could get a small external hard drive that, the size of it fit in your pocket if you would like to have that as well. But you should probably have more than one of those options, to be honest. Some of those third-party apps that we mentioned earlier will also allow for cloud or off-site backups, but they'll come with the monthly service fee and that they aren't monitored unless you're monitoring them yourselves. And moving on to the last slide here, recovery and continuity. Backing up your data is great, but it really only is important if you know that you can recover and restore that data that you were trying to protect. One of the worst feelings is thinking that you have backups, issue comes about that you need to restore a file, a folder, or even an entire server. You go to look at those backups and they aren't recoverable for whatever reason. So part of our packages with recovery and continuity is that we make sure that the backups are being completed, but restoration tests happen periodically and things like that, because a backup is no good if it can't be restored. So it's very important. So a couple of the terms here that are pretty simple for most, self-explanatory. Backup. So that's really just creating an extra copy of data from a source. Recovery means restoring deleted or damaged data from the source that created the backup originally. And the term continuity is the readiness to maintain critical functions after an emergency or disruption. So backups are part of your business continuity to make sure that you are ready to continue operating at a sufficient level if a data loss occurs or any other type of emergency or disruption were to occur. And some of those things that I mentioned earlier, monitoring backups is only part of it. You also have to test the recovery. File restoration is simple file and folder restoring. Usually that's something that was deleted or changed that you want to revert back to a previous copy. Full system recovery is, an entire server has crashed and you need to reload it and put all the data back and restore that full image that we had backed up. And backing up your data is important, and it is an investment that you make to ensure that you are able to recover and ready to recover those main critical functions after an emergency or disruption. A good way to think about the monetization of this is if you were to lose data or a server or critical information and it caused you to be down for 4 hours, it caused you to be down for 12 hours, caused you to be down for several days, what would that cost your business versus what does it cost to maintain proper backups and continuity? So in closing, your data is the most valuable piece of your technology, so make sure that you protect it. Always make sure you have 3 copies of data. That is important, and it is necessary, not optional. You should make the investment in your technology to make sure your data is protected and that you can recover from any issues. That way you can protect yourself, you can protect your employees and your clients. And just remember that CPU is always here to lend advice, even if there's no monetary gain. We just want to make sure that you are aware, you are educated, and we help you maintain the proper business continuity plan that is important for your success. I appreciate everyone's time today. Hopefully you found something that was advantageous to you. So once again, thank you for your time today and partnership with CPU. Thank you very much.